Chapter 1. An Elf's Murmur. Oh, it's another beautiful day. The sky is a clear blue, high and cloudless. The humidity is low despite the strong sunshine, so it's surprisingly cool in the shade. If a breeze blew, it would be reasonably pleasant, but unfortunately there was no wind at the moment. Well, I'm grateful for that though. The wind is my worst enemy, whipping up fine dust and damaging my precious things. In the distance, I stare blankly at the flickering shimmer of the sun, the nearly empty horizon distorted by the intense heat of the sun. The intense sunlight and heat, as well as the reflected light from the ground, make it impossible for any animal to be active during the day. Correction, you can see shadows running around in the shimmering sun. The second biggest cadet is the one who is shouting and running under the blazing sun. They are the ones who are ruining my precious, precious art. Can't it just rain and clean them up? It rarely rains here, but when it does, it's a downpour. The desolate land has no water retention capacity, and the water that collects in the lowlands quickly increases in volume, sometimes to the point of flooding. That's how we'll get them all. Kukaka. After that, when the water retreats, greenery sprouts and the land becomes wonderfully green. Of course, they will also return to the earth as fertilizer, so we can kill two birds with one stone. Oh, but then there is one drawback to this. The sprouting greenery looks like heaven, but it only lasts a few weeks. In no time at all, the land returns to its original dry state. Sometimes there is a nasty giant weed called the magic tree that grows. They are extremely fertile and can turn into dense forests in a few years if left unchecked. This may seem like a good thing for the greening of dry land, but these dense forests are a tricky thing to deal with, and the explosive growth of small animals can cause considerable damage to crops, especially in agricultural areas. In addition, the dense forest of magic trees produces a large amount of a mysterious substance called magic, which when concentrated, can cause animals to become violent as they may develop special abilities and may attack people. That's why I have to cut it down and burn it down immediately. The magic can also affect people and cause them to develop special abilities, but only in children. In the case of people, it doesn't make them violent, but it does create organs in their bodies to store magic. I have one and it's a complicated feeling because, damn it, I need it. But I don't know if I want this empty place to turn into a jungle. If you think about it, bad cadets break my precious things more often than demon elements, you know. Yes! First, I should use those annoying cadets as bait for the demon beasts, and then burn down the demon tree after they are gone from my sight, ahahaha. Iron Karyaku Cow, Heavenly Lieutenant Lord, even if you are a princess of the Sakura Flower Kingdom, please do not dress in such a trashy manner and mutter dangerous complaints in male language. The one who interrupted my pleasant fantasy with a really cold tone was the Technical Maintenance Officer, Lieutenant Nagato. Even though I'm a princess, I'm just royalty with no real authority. Even if you don't have any real power, you are still from a famous family and are allowed to attend central social gatherings, so you still have as much influence as the head of the cow. She started to complain about something goofy, but it's always the same, so I ignored her. Incidentally, I'm in the armored cavalry hangar at Abad Base, the only spaceport on the planet Iberium. The building, made of a special white ceramic structure, is very plain and tasteless, lacking any of the glamour or bustle of a commercial spaceport. The surrounding area is a barren land with a desolate landscape, and the nearest town is about 500 kilometers away, with almost no people coming and going. Iberium is a remote planet that is off the regular shipping routes. That's why there is no spaceport for civilian use, and this base plays that role as well. There are only regular flights once a month and a large cargo ship that brings in goods from the outside once every 6 months. So, inevitably, the only people who have business here are almost exclusively military personnel. Well, even though it's in a remote area, it's still a planet. It's prosperous and has a surprisingly large population. However, the majority of people are satisfied with their lives here and have no need for the spaceport. However, there are still some young people who yearn for the outside world. The problem is the economic disparity and the lack of distribution. If you want to live here, there is no problem, but if you want to move to another planet, you need a lot of money, contacts, and transportation. Most of the politics and economics are done on this planet, but if ordinary people want to have contact with the outside world, the most direct way is the military. If you get ahead in the military, you can get in touch with the outside world, or you can be transferred to another planet or even to the central worlds. That's why the supply of cadets will never run out. I look around the hangar and let out a sigh. Lieutenant Iron, are you listening to me? In the meantime, after a lengthy explanation, she is standing in front of me, with her light brown hair cut into a bob. Her eyes are sharp, and she looks like a soldier. She wears a mechanic's military uniform, has tight limbs and small breasts, and looks like a neutral man at first glance. I like it. I like your small breasts. I couldn't help but utter, Lieutenant Irondano. Are you looking for a fight? You know I'm jealous of you, right? Big breasts just get in the way of maintenance. I peeled off the top of my uniform and carelessly grabbed my breasts. Please don't. There's a lot of young soldiers here. I suddenly noticed the eyes of the cadets running outside, glancing at me. Some of them are bending forward a bit, but that's always the case. It's good to be young, isn't it? They can get excited by this kind of thing. Maybe I'm going to be their wanker fuel tonight. As I've said many times before, you should be aware of your own appearance as an ancient elf. That's not something that an unmarried princess would say. I myself don't think I'm that good of a princess, but I'm considered the first or second most beautiful princess in Cow. However, the standard of beauty and ugliness in Cow is somewhat ambiguous, especially because there are other races called subhumans. In the first place, the ancient elves are considered beautiful if they have modest breasts. So, my large breasts are a bit out of line with that standard. Besides, even if you call me an unmarried princess, I'm 118 years old this year, an age when most ancient elves would have gotten married by now, even if they take a long time to grow up. But I still haven't found a partner to marry yet. I'm not proud of it, but it's as big as my breasts. I don't want to get married at all. I'd rather be single for the rest of my life than open my legs to the nauseating bunch of people above me. I got up, folded my arms, and glared at Lieutenant Nagato. That line. Is that from the Warriors Week Knights band? Oh, you know them? It's no wonder, you're also here maintaining the armored cavalry. The Warriors Week Knights band is the title of an old show. In the Renza Federation, large or small, the humanoid armored cavalry is the weapon of choice. Of course, we're all well aware of their inefficiency as weapons. But there is something about them that outweighs their inefficiency, something that brings elation and awe. There's a beauty of style, and we love it so much. And since we have the scientific power to operate such inefficient weapons on a remote planet, we don't have the option of not using them just because they are inefficient. And of course, because of this, there are many dramas for young and old featuring the humanoid armored cavalry. And the Warriors Week Knights band is a work that created a bit of excitement. It was not popular with mothers and guardians of the world because of its rather vulgar lines, but entertainment is always more interesting when it is poisonous. It doesn't matter that Lieutenant Iron's foul mouth is delaying her marriage, and I think it's her own fault, but this is a military base and we're on a mission, so if you don't behave a little better, you won't be able to show the people below you. Duty? It's no wonder I'm bored since you guys took away my job, isn't it? Whose fault is it that I'm stuck here in a corner of the hangar providing tonight's wank fuel for bad cadets? If you have a problem with that, give me back my lovely weak knights and let me get to work. Weak knights are 8-meter tall, general purpose, humanoid armored cavalry, the lowest rank of armored cavalry. It is the first cavalry body that every humanoid armored cavalry pilot has to deal with. So many veterans prefer it and dare to customize it. No, it's cool to beat the top armored cavalry with these weak knights. Those who are qualified to pilot the Heavenly Knights class of armored cavalry in the final battle should be strong enough to do so. Winning on cavalry performance is the height of wildness. You are welcome to instruct us as much as you like, but if you take everything away and do it yourself, we will not be able to train our new recruits. And you'll have to do it manually, etc. Then Lieutenant Nagato glared at my chest, as if it were an enemy of her parents. That's why your breasts are in the way, sir. Well, manual labor involves a lot of hard work and getting into tight spaces. My big chest is in the way. I don't care if you stare at me that much. In the past, in the early stages of civilization, it would have been difficult to change the size of a person's breasts without changing their function. With today's medical technology, it was easy. However, this kind of plastic surgery is usually not welcomed, although the idea changes a bit depending on the era. The beauty that people seek is mostly what the majority of people consider to be beautiful. Of course, it varies from person to person, but they are all similar. Moreover, modern medical technology can change the genetic structure of a person, which is not in line with the concept of diversity. This is why the practice is basically considered taboo. There are also patents on genetic modification. For example, it is forbidden to mimic the appearance of a famous actress. Of course, if you are born that way, there is no problem. After all, there are patent restrictions on most forms of beauty. Even before that, there is a deep-rooted belief that it is better to be natural as you were born. In the kingdom of Cow, it is mortally embarrassing for anyone, regardless of gender, to have their plastic surgery revealed. In other words, for this reason, Lieutenant Nagato, who admires large breasts, sees my breasts as an enemy. In the first place, I can't make them smaller either. So, it's mutual. Lieutenant Iron, is it my imagination that I feel like I'm getting a one-sided mauling? It's called a difference in values. I'm jealous of your little tits. Kudos. Anyway, no matter. Even though we are the space force of a provincial country planet, they have maintenance machines and even medical tanks. It was true that there were only a few people who could repair an armored cavalry by hand nowadays. Everything is replaced unit by machines, and biological parts are repaired with nanomachines. However, there are still many veterans who do maintenance by hand. Even though the weak knights have been simplified, they are still made to look like people. They have many complicated moving parts. That's why skilled craftsmanship is what makes the weak knights more than just miscellaneous soldiers. Heck, with supply stagnation and budget cuts, our maintenance units are in a state where they tend to function poorly. You'll never get satisfactory performance without some manual labor. Especially on the front lines, where maintenance equipment is in short supply, the manual labor of veterans often comes in handy. It's like a field hospital. It's true that in a remote base like this, personnel like Lieutenant Iron are very useful, but don't forget that this is also the reason why you were sent here as punishment and missed seeing the legendary Godly Knights. Gah. I was hit with an unexpected and painful counterattack, and I fell forward with a crumpled heap. My friend, Shirin Rengoku Kaisen, the third daughter of the first prince of the Kingdom of Kaisen, who entered the Galactic Federation under the name of Karen and destroyed the great pirates there instead of seizing the Imperial ship. She brought back the ship, and the Supreme Knight who was legendary in Renza, the man who became its master, the twin gods of all the beginnings, and one of the pillars, ZNV. I wanted to see. It's frustrating. It was really frustrating. I wanted to see it up close, to touch it. But I couldn't go there. In fact, I was supposed to go to the Galactic Federation. Seeing my appearance, Lieutenant Nagato's expression returned to normal. A true legend. But was it real? I showed you the footage of the battle. It's definitely real. I swear it. Yes, it's definitely unusual, but still, we came here early. When Lieutenant Nagato said that one of her men rushed up to her and interrupted the conversation. Excuse me, sir. Lieutenant Nagato Dano, weak knight maintenance is complete. All figures are in order. Where are the cadets? They're already assembled, sir. The team in charge of the recruits is also standing by. Lieutenant Iron, the work you've been waiting for is done. Lieutenant Nagato said with a smile on her face. But I know how much intrigue is hidden behind that sweet talk. The subordinate who came to report to me didn't say anything important either. You want to train new recruits, don't you, Lieutenant Nagato? If that's the case, why don't you let him stay there until the end? Take your time with your hands. I sarcastically said with a bit of an obscene hand motion. But Lieutenant Nagato's expression remained fearless. It's about the awarding party of the ennoblement of Altus Algers next week. Huh? That bastard is having a party for a personnel matter that hasn't even been decided yet. My brow wrinkles up. He's the source of all my frustration and stress. You're speaking too loudly. It's not the party I'm talking about. I'm talking about the freighter that's bringing in the supplies for that party. Hey, maybe he has a guard of armored cavalry. To be frank, I don't care about the bastard's party, but there will be an escort to transport the important supplies. And if I'm right, 2 of the new earthly knights, Fei Rong, will be here for maintenance, but if Lieutenant Iron is so sure, it will be a good experience for the newcomers. Come on, let's go. After all, the final adjustment work is too much for a rookie. And of course, the new earthly knights. Well, I guess I'll let the new armored cavalry do the talking and go along with Lieutenant Nagato's ploy. The ranks of the top armored cavalry are weak knights, earthly knights, aqueous knights, and heavenly knights, in that order. I rushed to the hangar where the cadets were waiting. And there, the bastard Suiza was giving the newcomers a lesson in self-praise that would rot your ears and make you want to punch him in the face. Well, to sum it up, if you want to get off this prison-like planet, don't disobey, do what I say. Oh! Lieutenant Iron. The bastard who had been giving a great lesson noticed me and came running over with a big smile on his face. The lesson was cut short, but he was just bragging about something that didn't matter anyway, so it was a little annoying to see the relieved faces of the cadets that were released from it, but I know the feeling well, so I put up with it. Commander Altus Algers, thank you for your efforts. Well, he's my superior officer in a way, so I salute him. Yes, of course, I'll wear my uniform properly, but this is not because I'm a superior officer, it's to hide my flabby body from the constant gaze of the asshole. Just as well. I was just about to give you an invitation. I'm not happy. In a week's time, there's going to be a big party to celebrate my elevation and bestowal. So, I'd really like to invite you to attend, Iron Karyaku-sama. In other words, he didn't want me to attend as Lieutenant Iron, but as the princess of the Cow royal family. Wasn't it 6 months later that the decision of the granting of the title was made? No, I received an advance notice from someone in the royal court's executive office that it would be announced soon. Well, I thought it was a little early, but people around me thought that we should celebrate the happy occasion right away. After all, this is a place where entertainment is scarce, so I thought that as the person who stands at the top, I should take the opportunity to do so. How wonderful. But I'm troubled. I thought it was going to be held in 6 months, so I sent my formal wear to maintenance while I still could. Oh my god. His skeevy face contorts. After all, what he wants is me in formal attire, in my position as the princess of the Cow royal family. If he just wanted me to attend, I would wear a military uniform, but that would mean I would be attending as a subordinate. In other words, the clothes I wear will tell everyone what I think of this bastard, and it will change his status. Well, this is just a way for the royals to say no, I don't have any clothes to wear. Of course, I have spare clothes, and if I hurry up, I can make it in time, but there is no value or meaning in spending the express fare to attend a recital for this limp dick bastard. In the first place, even though I no longer have any real power in Cow, I still have many social and business contacts as a member of the royal family. When it comes to the schedule of events to be attended in formal attire, it would have to be decided at least 6 months in advance. To make such a sudden interruption, it would have to be someone very important or close to me. Even though he was the commander of the armored cavalry unit, it was too inappropriate to ask me to attend in formal attire, let alone in military uniform. Well, I'm the reason for that. In other words, they look down on me as a delinquent princess who has been forced to stay in this place because there is no one to take me as a wife. I'm a princess, even if I'm rotten. The merit of inviting the royal family to the general public is immeasurable. Please invite me again in 6 months when you give me official notice. Of course, my formal attire would not arrive at that time for other reasons. However, since it was a transfer party for a superior officer, I would attend in military uniform, and I would be happy to congratulate him. Of course, I'll just show my face and go home quickly. I looked behind me and saw 2 female officers staring at me. You don't have to stare so much, I'm not going to steal him. The 2 women are famous in this base for their good looks, and they have been hired to be public relations officers. He has no intention of paying respect to a delinquent princess without a mate. I am fully aware of this, of course, and those sluts are also victims of the bastard, so I'm not going to get upset about something like this. All new cadets, hurry up and board. Don't waste any time. Run for it. I gave the bastard a quick salute and kicked the cadets' asses. I'd rather deal with a bunch of cadets than watch them crack under their filthy ravings and thick makeup forever. That's when I noticed that there was someone a little different among the cadets. Being chosen as a weeknight pilot is the first step on the career ladder. You're nervous, you're afraid, and you're even more nervous when it's your first time aboard an armored cavalry. Of course, even the most seasoned veterans are nervous when it comes to actual combat. But one of them, the one who runs like lightning to the weeknights, is clearly still a young cadet. However, the figure behind it seems to be a veteran operator of an instructor. No, it felt the atmosphere similar to the knight riding the heavenly knights that I saw when I was in the royal palace. Stupid, it was just my imagination. When I saw the young man with a shaved head, which is rare nowadays, and still had a hint of innocence, I shook my head to drive the thought out of my mind. Adjustment is the process of linking the cavalry to the operator. However, it is not as simple as it sounds, and the level of linkage can be customized from complete thought control to manual operation. This is why it takes a long time of training, adjustment, and training of the auxiliary AI before you can use the cavalry like a limb. Of course, by the time the cadets arrive here, they will have been customized to some extent through simulations, but it is still necessary to accumulate and correct data through adjustment training using the actual cavalry, and through experience in actual competition. Listen up. Your current data is only from simulations. The actual cavalry have their own quirks, and their conditions change from moment to moment while being piloted. And that includes your physical condition and mental state. This is even more apparent during actual combat. Of course, the computer and auxiliary AI will help you fine-tune it, but don't be overconfident. I checked the adjustment status of each of the cavalry and their cadets and gave instructions to each of them. In the event of a battle, the computer may be damaged. And each computer has its own quirks. Of course, this is usually a small margin of error. But in a battle, it will appear as a slight lag, and the accumulation of that slight lag can be the difference between life and death. So don't neglect your training until you can completely control the cavalry by yourselves. There is a sense of unity that only comes from being in a humanoid weapon. It is something that cannot be expressed in numbers, something that is truly vague and unscientific. It could be described as a cult. However, this is the reason why inefficient humanoid weapons outperform conventional weapons. When fully adjusted, weak knights can become the very body of the manipulator, turning him or her into a superhuman. The weak knights can attack, evade, defend, and perform every action with an order of magnitude more precise and movement than any other weapon. Of course, this requires both the training of the operator himself and the training to adjust. Only a handful of people are capable of this, and in simple combat, ordinary weapons are far more efficient. Beyond a certain level, however, the armored cavalry becomes a truly one-of-a-kind, all-purpose superweapon with far greater versatility. That's when I noticed an operator who was having a hard time adjusting. What's wrong? I'm sorry, sir. I'm having trouble stabilizing the link with 013. I see the operator's vitals are stable. It was hard to believe that he was a rookie, but rather he was stable like a veteran. I took a glance at the cockpit and saw that it was the young man I had seen earlier. However, 013 also had no problems with the maintenance checks. It's all about the reality in front of us. Hurry up and recheck. Yes, sir. The program that checks the pilot status is restarted to make sure there are no problems, and the check is started immediately. After tens of thousands of checks in just a few seconds, the weak knight and the pilot are both clear. But the link was still unstable. Lord Lieutenant. He sighs at the pilot, who looks up at him anxiously and displays his profile. Weak Knight 013 pilot Sena. He's originally from the amusement park. He has a magical organ. The largest continent on the planet, Avalum, has been completely overrun by a sea of magical trees. In addition, there are various other large and small islands, as well as some areas on other continents, which cover about 70% of the total land surface. There are many people who live their lives by using the phenomena created by transforming the magic emitted by the magical trees. Rejecting scientific civilization, these people live a slow life, just like an early civilization, using magic, magical trees, and mutated magical animals as resources. They call the continent of magical trees the amusement park, because to outsiders, it's a kind of carefree life, but all the people living there have organs that store magic. But we didn't see any problems in the simulation phase. Those who have organs that store magic have their bodies enhanced by magic to varying degrees. However, if they come here and experience a shortage of magic, their metabolic functions will drop. That should have been included in the data, too. Renza has a good amount of data, especially since Cow has many magical organs. The operator looks at me in frustration. Don't put too much faith in the magical organ data. Rescan it and pass it on to us. The magic organ, science, and technology do not go well together. The accumulated data is just enough to get it working, but not enough to guarantee it. I ordered the operator to do so, then rushed towards weak Knight 013 and plunged my upper body into the cockpit. Ugh. Recruit Sena, you have a magic organ, right? What's your rank? I turned off the communicator and spoke in a whisper to the young man, who seemed a little puzzled by the sudden thrusting of my upper body into him. It's common knowledge that the number of magical organs accumulated in an amusement park is to be kept secret. Sena averted his gaze from me. I'm aware of your level of secrecy, but you came here. What's the point of hiding it here, where there is no magic? If you don't want to do that, you can quit the weeknights. Sena averted his gaze from me and clammed up. He seemed to be confused about something else rather than refusing to answer my question. And if you look closely, you can see a blush on his cheeks. Could it be? I looked down at my chest. Oh, I see. Because of the way my upper body was plunged into the narrow opening, my ample and unnecessarily voluptuous twin mounds were pressed against the lower part of the opening. In addition, my tank top was caught, and my breasts were on the verge of freedom. Of course, even I, a simple-minded person, know how young men feel when they see a woman in such a state in front of them in a small cockpit. I was just warned by Lieutenant Nagato. But I'm in a position where public gazing is an everyday occurrence. If I go to a party, I'm often exposed to the gaze of greasy, dirty people with their bosoms open. I am not embarrassed by the fact that the young man in front of me is now staring at me at close range. On the contrary, I was relieved to see that this young man was so calm and appropriate for his age. The final measurement stage before coming here was rank 19.2. 19.2. I was momentarily speechless when I heard the ridiculous number that Cadet Sena finally stated. What brought me back to my senses was the transmission from the operator. Lieutenant Iron, the rescan does not show any differences from the previous data. No differences? But other than that, the cause of the link failure is. As I came back to myself, I noticed something strange in the process of checking and examining the displayed data. This is something that I probably wouldn't have noticed without a lot of experience. Is this a biased type of probability? It would also be a negative displacement, and the slightly surprised and awkward look on Cadet Sena's face convinced me that my prediction was correct. What did you do during the simulation? Wasn't there supposed to be an effect even then? We were using manual controls for the cadets that could be. What? I quickly looked at Sena's report card as he replied as if he had given up. I can't say for sure without examining the data, but based on my experience, his probability bias should be quite serious. I quickly activated the customized data of Sena's simulations and found that it was almost completely manual. Hey. I was more than a little surprised by that fact, but what was more problematic was that the performance level he had maintained as if it was measured around the selection pass line. Of course, an ordinary operator wouldn't notice the anomaly at first glance, but as long as it's combined with other data, there's no doubt about it. What are you doing? I glanced at Sena's face as if to gauge his intentions. In any simulation situation, it's difficult to maintain a constant score. If this was the result that he intended, then I would have to say that he has reached the level of a veteran. Either way, it was impossible for a trainee soldier who was about to take the test to perform such a trick. Oh well. Now was not the time to speculate on the young man's intentions. I deactivated all the links and started to make minor adjustments. If you're A, rank 19.2, you should be able to have a good life over there, but you don't want to live there? That's not why I'm here, but I wanted to see the rest of the world. I sensed from his tone that there was a reason, so I stopped pursuing the matter further and concentrated on my work. It's a lot trickier than I thought. Link manipulation is a way to integrate the special suit worn with the control of the weeknights. It picks up the movements of the operator's body, the biological reactions and thoughts that are trying to move it, and performs various operational tasks on the cavalry. That is exactly how the weeknights become the body of the pilot. I can only guess from the simulation data, but isn't your probability bias quite abnormal? It should have interfered with your daily life, right? Since I was born with it, I'm used to it. You can't simply say that, can you? The young man seemed to be in a state of deep insight, although his reaction to women still seems to be naive. Kukukuku. To be honest, this is the first time I've ever been face-to-face with a member of the opposite sex in a small space like this and watched their reactions to my physical body in detail and up close. For a woman who has been unmarried for as long as I have, and who has lost all confidence in her ability to be a woman, the reaction of the young man in front of me was an enjoyable experience that stimulated my self-esteem. At the same time, it's quite fun to break down the young man's self-assured expression. However, I'm on a mission now. If I don't do something about the link, the young man's life will be in danger, and, more importantly, my precious weeknights will be damaged. Don't make me take the trouble. I'm sorry. The way he turned his head apologetically, he looked like the little dog I had at home. I struggled a bit to suppress my grin and focus my attention on adjusting. If there's a linkage problem, the best way to do it is completely manually. It's an old technique that uses only the control balls of both hands, myoelectricity, and some thought, but it's more reliable and not as susceptible to probability bias. The movements are quite limited and require a certain level of skill, but it has the advantage of being able to go out without having to make detailed adjustments, no matter what kind of pilot you are. The other move takes time. It is also possible to gain comparable power in addition to the detailed links. It's a way to have a specially trained auxiliary AI to assist in behavior. Many veterans choose this method, and some even name the AI and treat it like a woman. Of course, building it would require a long period of actual adjustment, which is impossible at this stage. Anyway, I've got it working. It's in almost a manual state, but you do that all the time, so deal with it. If you can't, you'll just be disqualified. I managed to get it into a controllable state, but it wasn't satisfactory to me at all. I made a few minor adjustments to try to increase the linkage rate, but it was only a small amount. I don't have any obligation to make this young man an armored cavalry pilot. I'd rather have him disqualified than have him destroy my precious armored cavalry. Understood, sir. Wow, you're full of confidence, aren't you? I was a little miffed at the smile on the young man's face in front of me, so I turned on the communicator so that all the trainees could hear. All right, you inferior cadets. We're going to do a field test now, and anyone who messes up in there will have to clean it up themselves. That's right, you can use the cockpit as a dish to eat your meals. Are you serious? Said a confused voice from the cadets. And the idiot who damages my precious weeknights is going to marathon 10 laps around the perimeter of the base in full ground combat gear. Of course, the only food you'll be eating during that time will be emergency rations. They all screamed at the same time. It was loud enough to be heard from the cockpits of the weeknights, not through the communicators. Lieutenant Arendano, the base has a circumference of about 500 kilometers. I don't know who said that, but my addiction explodes at the fearful request. Maybe it was the young man in front of me. So what? We're going to work all night to fix the weeknights that you guys destroy without thinking. It's not uncommon for us to be forced to repair and maintain them while surviving on emergency rations. The base's cafeteria has set hours, and if you miss them, you don't eat. After all, the military is tight-fisted, and the military on a remote planet is not much different from the police. What can be outsourced is left to the private sector to save money. That's why delivery is not allowed. If there is a special standby mission, the logistics unit will make deliveries, but not to the maintenance department. There is a store on the base, but it sells only luxury items, not lunchboxes or anything to fill your stomach. It is possible to go to the nearest city for a meal, but they have business hours anyway. Delivery is also possible, but due to the nature of the military base, the transfer gate requires advance application, and since it takes time to check, the food will get cold. You can also use the time freezer, but of course you will have to pay a premium for that or order 100 units. Instant food is expensive, so I thought about cooking my own food, but then I would have to pay for the ingredients and equipment, and where to cook it would be a problem. The wages for the maintenance team were low, and if they had to spend almost every day like that, the angles coefficient would be a sad figure. If you guys break the ship and replace too many parts, people will wonder if you're not doing a good job. If it's you, you can get delivery because you're supposed to be on standby for operations, but we can't because we're on regular duty. You'll end up with an unlimited supply of shitty emergency rations. Meals and shifts were possible under certain circumstances, but basically, the mission was the priority of the active duty troops, and the maintenance people had to cover for them. While active duty units rotate to mealtimes, maintenance is a pre- and post-mission, so they often miss mealtimes. When a ship is in combat deployment, maintenance is so urgent that there is no time to eat. In the past, when I raised this issue, I was told that I could eat as many emergency rations as I wanted. However, the emergency ration was seriously bad, as evidenced by the reaction of the cadets. I hated him even more when I found out that the person who proposed the outsourcing was that bastard commander. I can easily imagine him colluding with the contractor and receiving the margin. I can't tell you how many times I thought about dunking him in the emergency ration tank. Look, we're always in a state of punishment. Sure, but when you're 10 laps in. Without bioenhancement, the normal record is 60 days, 5 hours, 36 minutes, and 30 seconds. Arendano, no matter how much of an officer you are, isn't that a bit arrogant? I don't know who it is, but he gives me his opinion in a shaky voice. This just goes to show how much they hate emergency rations. All you have to do is not break it. It's that simple, right? The cadets were silenced by my righteous argument. But the young man in front of me smiled, confused, but as if he sympathized with my complaint. I pushed my chest into the air again and retreated from the face I was holding close to me so that the young man could see me clearly. I quickly removed my gaze and let my cheeks blush a little at the young man. So, let's see how you do. I glared at the young man, pulled out my upper body, and jumped down from the weeknight. All right, all maintenance personnel, stand down. Activate all armored cavalry. I stopped a short distance away to check on the situation. In fact, this would be their first hurdle as a weeknight operator. Lieutenant Arendano, confirm activation of all armored cavalry. It was good to see the 50 cavalry standing up and lining up in an orderly fashion. The irritation I felt earlier is blown away when I see this cool sight. All right. All armored cavalry move to their positions in order. And under my command, the cadets take their first steps. Gain. The first step was taken with a heavy sound, and most of the trainees staggered like babies who have just started walking. 01 overturned. 032. The ones that staggered but started to walk were allowed to go, while the ones that completely overturned were kept in place. In their first real cavalry training, the cadets were exposed to the shock of the linked cavalry and their own bodies and went into a state of mild shock. Of course, with today's technology, it is possible to have them experience this in the simulation stage, but it is difficult to predict what will happen in actual combat. This is one of the aptitude tests to see how resistant you are to such troubles. Weak knights who have reached the predetermined position will move to the second stage. The next step after the walk was the driving test, but again, several cavalrymen dropped out. However, about 30 of them still managed to control the weak knights, and about 10 of them were so stable in their movements that it was hard to believe it was their first time. Humph. I don't like it. They were supposed to be riding weak knights for the first time today, but their movements were clearly experienced. The bastard commander, a potential minion? The first step to getting ahead in life is to be in the good graces of Commander Algers. The bastard selects the best candidates from among the new trainees and invites them to a voluntary study session called Juku. There, they are given priority to experience simulations containing actual impact data in advance, and retired veterans serve as instructors. In addition, the bastard and the student alumni use their contacts to introduce and train with the most advanced training equipment, which they would not normally have access to. To make matters worse, there are rumors that the budget is being diverted from the military. Of course, this is not an absolute evil. Training as many elites as possible is good for the future of this planet, as long as it's not for personal reasons. But in the end, the students are the private army of that bastard. In other words, they are a faction of bastards. In the first place, there is no reason or budget to maintain so many forces on a rural planet. There is no need to use the weak knights to maintain security on the planet, and the best they can do is to fight pirates to maintain shipping routes, and to fight the magical beasts that attack the town that people can't handle. That's why there are less than 1,000 armored cavalry on the entire planet. The number of cavalrymen, including reservists, is about 4,000, and the number of cavalrymen that are replenished annually, including reassignments to the center, wear and tear, and retirements, is about 20. However, those who are chosen for the job have a lot of possibilities. Cavalrymen with high ability and military service may be recommended for transfer to the armored cavalry unit of the central planet Cow. And cavalrymen with outstanding military service can be knighted as officers and even gain a position above the head of state of the local planet. In order to achieve his goal of undefeated, he has chosen not to fight. In other words, he will not fight or accept any final battle or duel. Of course, this is impossible under normal circumstances. If you don't accept the duel, you will lose, but what the bastard is defending is the planet itself. If the planet is completely taken over by the enemy forces, he loses, but no matter how much damage is done, there is no way he can lose unless something goes wrong. And even then, it is on a planet of no strategic importance. Even if the pirates attack a town on the ground and cause a little damage, they will retreat once they are satisfied with the situation. They will not occupy the town and stay there. The question is whether the rest of the world will accept that. The armored cavalry unit is the flower of the military and has absolute say in the military, which means it can even suppress the opinions of base commanders and the government. But no matter the process, their records show that they are undefeated. All those cadets collared by that bastard. The weak knights riding in the distance are the very same virus-contaminated, slightly better performing cadets that were bought by those bastards. I want to incinerate them when I think of the elite cavalrymen who protect our country being turned into the private army of those bastards. No matter how good their performance is, they are filth nesting in the noble weak knights. I want to burn the filth. Of course, not all of them have been prepped at the bastards' cram school. There were others who managed to keep up with those who were running behind them. And that 013 seems to be one of them. As expected. Although it was in the midst of an unstable and immature group, the natural behavior of 013 was unmatched by the other weak knights. At first glance, it looks like a dangerous movement caused by poor piloting skills, but my eyes, which know the weak knights well, cannot be deceived. From the sound of it, I could tell that it was smooth enough not to put too much strain on the weak knight. In other words, 013 is just intentionally making it look poorly done. And considering the fact that it's mostly manual operation, it's an amazing skill. I don't know what you're up to, but if you're trying not to put too much strain on my precious weak knights, I'll let you off. Did you trip? Suddenly, 013 stumbled on an empty flat surface. When I quickly zoomed in on the image, I could see some kind of small animal running away. You avoided that thing? Still, it's unusual for a small animal to enter the space and for it to cross by the weak knights. Well, as I was about to say, that was unlucky. I remembered that young man's characteristics. Cuckoo, I see. Probability bias. I laughed. Speeding up. The speed of 013 increased, as if he was getting used to the controls, and it gradually moved to the top of the long line. Perhaps it is to reach the target point within the specified time so that it can move on to the next stage. But why do you have to go through all that trouble? It's as if he's trying to hide his power. If that's the case, there's only one answer. Is it because you don't want to be spotted by that bastard? In fact, not a few people dislike the commander. However, that's the same as giving up on your career at this stage. In a worst-case scenario, they will be relegated to the front lines and used as shields by their protégés, so most of them don't show it and carry out their duties without any trouble. Of course, there are rare people with a rebellious spirit who defy the authorities to their face, but in the end, they are just relegated to a quiet position by that bastard. All right. The 26 cavalrymen who reached the target point in time will now be transferred to my command for flight training. The examiner, a veteran cavalryman, signals to us. That's all I have to do. The rest of the time, I'll be taking care of those who dropped out. All right, let's get the dropouts back and recalibrate. I shouted, letting the weak knights who had dropped out of the driving test retrieve them. The weak knights won't break if they're tipped over a bit, but I'll give them a quick maintenance check, readjust the links, and train them from the first stage. There are slow starters everywhere, and this is a remedy for that. All cavalry adjustments are complete. Then resume with sequential walking. The simulation phase includes a minimum of space combat training, so in a month at the latest, they will be given that level of practical experience, and then their acceptance or rejection and assignment will be decided. However, those who reach the target point during the first stage have the highest chance of becoming the weak knights pilots, while those who follow will have to achieve very high grades to survive. Don't give up. On the battlefield, the ones who give up die first. Slow starters are not rated very high, but if they don't give up, they can catch up and overtake. Not every time, but there are those who do and pass. I watched the weak knights take off into the sky, beating the asses of the cadets that were in a slightly pessimistic mood. The next day, the wobbly cadets managed to get into flight training. By the last day of the recruitment exam, 35 people had been disqualified. As I had predicted, all of that bastard's pilots were at the top of the list, and the young man just barely passed. But it was during the final process, the space combat test, that the incident occurred. In satellite orbit, heavy tremor detected at 28.229. Confirming hyperspace jump of unknown ship. Based on mass ratio and weight tremor pattern, pirate ship 335 confirmed. The operator of the central control shouted with a rattling alarm. Tisk! You snackers! I frowned the moment the base broadcast came on. Because those were vultures that came regularly. But you're out of luck if you're around 28, even that bastard is as good as. Type 3 scramble. Type 3 scramble. Idiot. There are recruits in that area. I frowned at the Type 3 scramble that had been issued. Halfway between the point where the pirate ship appeared and the predicted planetary entry point, there was a group of recruits taking a simulated combat test in satellite orbit. If that was the case, it would be a good situation for a Type 2 scramble to intercept them. What's going on? I quickly sent a secret message to my friend and informant who was an operator at Central Control. You idiot! The informant's report was deafening. You're in charge here. I told Lieutenant Nagato and rushed to the emergency gate at the back of the maintenance dock, but the gate to Central Control was closed. Of course, even my pass was being rejected. Lieutenant Iron. Where are you trying to go, sir? Central Control. I'm going to punch that son of a bitch. Don't be ridiculous, we're scrambling. And the gate to Central is closed. Lieutenant Nagato and a few of the maintenance crew grabbed my arms to restrain me. Well, it's a natural response, so I don't act violently. But why is it that even the direct communication is blocked? It's Lieutenant Nagato, who is clinging to my arm, also seems to feel uncomfortable and looks away from me for a moment. However, submitting a request to the operational command is an overreaching act. Even if it's Lieutenant Iron, you'll be punished. Don't be silly. Without a doubt, that bastard is using the other candidates to let his protégés escape. You know who's in that brood. I know that. In addition to the top-performing students, there are also the children of powerful people such as military leaders and conglomerates. In order to let those people escape, he had the veteran manipulator of the recruits escort them, and then discarded the lower-performing students as pawns. Then it's, if only that son of a bitch had fought a duel. If the pirates are looking for a snack, it's unlikely that they'll attack the recruits just because they're being used as pawns. The target area for the pirates to loot was always the amusement park. The pirates always target amusement parks, which have local governments and little connection to the central government. They pay taxes, but as they are self-governing, sorties must be requested. Of course, there is a defense agreement in case of emergency, but the truth is that the military doesn't really want to take them down, or rather they are victims of the undefeated goal. The pirates are aware of this, and after they get a certain amount of harvest, they quickly retreat before the army comes back with a heavy hand. That's why it's called snacking. However, in this case, the pirates may think that it is more profitable to ransom the children of influential people. Even if I say something, but the enemy are pirates, and we're led by a bastard who has never fought. Looking at the recruits' weak knights, it was obvious that they were not officially equipped. And if you look at the weak knights with their escorts, anyone with a good intuition will immediately notice. Of course, as usual, they may choose to snack at the amusement park, but in any case, the danger of the recruits checking the pirates is high. In addition, the recruits who were ordered to intercept the pirates would probably follow the orders and fight back with their poor skills. And if the pirates attacked and wiped them out, the importance of joining the bastards' faction would increase. Son of a bitch. If the bastard had fought back properly, he wouldn't have been lambasted so much. The pirates attacked quite often, and on a scale that was quite large for pirates, and the accumulated damage was quite large. There are not a lot of pirate attacks on remote planets, but there are still too many. Some of the idiots are defending the bastard and unabashedly spouting that the pirates who come here regularly are claiming their own territory to the other pirates, resulting in less damage. It's no use saying that now, is it? Besides, pirates these days sometimes have ridiculously powerful armored cavalry. Rumor has it that the Heavenly Knights class has also been spotted, so it's important not to take them too seriously. That's insane. It's like that on all the outlying planets. The central government can't even get around to us. But if the rumors were true, then even if the bastards' armored cavalry was the best thing on the planet, they could still fall behind. However, there are not many such pirates, and the best they can do is the Aqueous Knights class. And if they lose, it's not as if they will immediately take over the planet. In the first place, for the pirates to do so, they would have to fight with all their might, and if they did, they would have an overwhelming advantage in terms of strength, no matter how remote the planet. Therefore, the interest of the duel was to avoid the damage that would be caused by the surprise attack and to arrest the pirates. For the pirates, the expected profit from the surprise attack will be obtained intact. If they lose, the bastard's honor will be slightly damaged, and the recruits will be able to return safely. What the hell are you doing here? That's what the army is for. Even if Lieutenant Iron were to punch that son of a bitch, it wouldn't be enough to change things. It's only for your own self-gratification. I glared at Lieutenant Nagato, but to my chagrin, she was right. Besides, if the enemy's attention is drawn to the test takers, that may take up more time and reduce the damage on the ground. By using the test takers as human shields? They're soldiers, sir. That's why you have veterans who can move and dispose of new recruits? Don't you think it's shameful? Orders from the top are absolute, sir. The looting victims in the ground war are civilians. If we can reduce that damage even by one person, it will be enough of an excuse, even if the recruits who were made into an excuse are wiped out. Either way, the command is in the hands of that bastard. Also, if you're thinking of sacrificing yourself, then it's useless. Even though the bastard wants to use me as a foil, it's only a bonus. After all, the most important requirement for a knighthood is to be undefeated. I'm not going to say that I don't like it, but I do like it. Damn it. For some reason, the image of that young man popped into my mind. Maybe it was because he was the only cadet I had direct contact with, or maybe it was because he was unique, but he was quite impressive. And the way he looked at my body, embarrassed in a way that was appropriate for his age, made me feel even younger, which made me feel even more resentful. The scramble cavalry launched one after another at a tremendous pace. That's pretty good for time. Yes, it is. The quicker than usual launch was probably to protect some of the recruits who were evacuating, but it was not bad for a sortie in such a short time. If this is our true strength, it is proof that we are functioning as an army, and it is also proof of our unflagging daily training. That's a fact I'm proud of as head of the maintenance team. I want each of you chiefs to bring him some food. Understood, sir. Well, once the scramble cavalry was launched, the maintenance team's combat deployment would be lowered by 1 level. It also loosened the grip of Lieutenant Nagato and the others who had grabbed me. I'm still going to punch that son of a bitch. Once the scramble launch was complete, it would be a little while before the chase team could launch. If I leave my post on an errand, it will not be a violation of my orders, and I will not be subject to punishment, so Lieutenant Nagato said simply. Copy that, good luck. What do you mean? The direct gate was locked down, so I took a very long detour to the central control. I was not restrained as I had expected, and what I saw when I entered the room, feeling a little out of sorts, was about 50 staff and operators staring appalled at the monitor showing the war situation. And also a dumb bastard who was showing an even dumber face than usual. Battle? No, you're having a duel? But when I looked at the monitor, I was instantly drawn to the scene, as were the others around me. There, a single weak knight was engaged in a battle with a top-ranked pirate armored cavalry. What's more, that top model looked familiar. That's Yuzushio. Aqueous Knights. I don't know where he got it, but it's an armored cavalry of the Aqueous Knights class, equipped with cadets for space battles on the normal type of Kaizen Central Army specification. Of course, it's not something that a pirate should have. The pilot has not received orthodox martial arts training, but there is no doubt that he is quite a performer. However, weak knights are overwhelmed against it. What's going on? What's going on? I came to my senses and quickly approached a familiar operator who was close at hand. Yes, that's the 013 cadet. The operator was staring at the monitor and showed me a fast-paced video of the situation after that bastard fucking idiot had turned some of the recruits into an excuse. It was just stunning. I could see why they were all staring silently. The situation was as follows. First of all, the 013 weak knight had gathered the remaining recruits and instructed them to do something. Flew out alone and used the debris that had not been recovered in the satellite orbit to disrupt the enemy weak knight's mobility. Then, other recruits opened fire from the rear, and one of the shots hit a mine that seemed to have been left behind by a sunk battleship in the past and began to repeatedly cause violent induced explosions. While the enemy was moving left and right, 013 was avoiding debris obstacles and destroying the enemy individually with impressive maneuvers that made me fall in love with him. Seriously, that guy, so much. The young man, Cadet Sena, had been hiding his abilities, which was to be expected, but this was still too abnormal. After all, pirates have a lot of experience fighting in space. In other words, many of them are more used to fighting than the regular army. It's as if you're watching a drama with just the supportive shooting of a childish friend's army. I'm going to get really wet. I muttered to myself. However, there was no way that I wouldn't be burning up at the sight of such an exhilarating battle that seemed to release all my frustration. And with the enemy weak knights in a state of total silence, Cadet Sena sent out a signal for a duel towards the enemy battleship. Ha ha ha, I'm sure that side will take it. They have two. If they had been beaten to this extent by a single weak knight, it would be shameful for them to throw in any more forces. Rather, the pirates may have been excited by the appearance of 013 weak knight, and it can be seen that they were happy to jump out after accepting the duel with 2 replies. So, it connects to this flow? Actually, when the 013 weak knight called for a duel, Commander Algers was in a hurry to give the order to retreat. Are you insane? How dare that idiot interfere with the flow of the game? Is he a virgin? He has no balls. As expected, everyone here was staring at me like that. If there was anyone in Renza who would dare to make a scene in this situation, it would only be a fool who was inconvenienced by the situation and could not read the atmosphere. Even if they are afraid of the bastard's power, or even if they have benefited greatly from him, the fact that they rejected the bastard who put a damper on the situation is proof of that. Cuckoo. I see. So that's why you're turning red like you've been boiled. A glance at the fucking idiot who is glaring at the monitor with great dissatisfaction and quickly returns to the monitor. He completely lost the desire to hit another shot. Rather, it doesn't matter if it doesn't go down like that. But is it too bad for Aqueous Knights? The defensive power and firepower of the two-ranked cavalry are very different. At this stage, it seems that he is doing something with speed avoidance and excellent shooting due to its light weight. Even so, he's used to fighting. No, I feel like he's used to avoiding it. The weak knight's piloting skills are excellent, but there are still some rough edges due to manual operation. The weak knights are deployed in the provinces, and the training cavalry is a very old type of cavalry used for examinations, so its performance is low. What makes up for this is the skill with which they construct their battles and, above all, their unparalleled ability to avoid crises. It's a good thing that I've been able to adjust and maintain it, but it's hard to overlook the difference in performance against a top-tier armored cavalry when it's a few generations old. The fact that he is able to compete on even terms with the armored cavalry shows just how skilled Cadet Sena is. No way, that guy does magic. There is one secret to piloting an armored cavalry. It is a link-enhancing technology known only to some members of Renza's royal family, but there is no way that a single recruit would know about it. However, Sena's piloting skills are too extraordinary. In addition, his magical element reserves are abnormally high. You're guiding it into the debris. I returned my attention to the battle and gave a small affirmation to the operator's murmur. In the presence of obstacles, the mobility of the enemy Aqueous Knights is visibly reduced, and their attacks are diffused by hitting obstacles. Moreover, the armored cavalry of Cadet Sena is like fish that have gained water, and they move more vividly in obstacles. As a result, the overwhelming difference in cavalry performance between weak knights and Aqueous Knights has been narrowed. However, the difference between the attack power of weak knights and the defense power of the enemy is insignificant, and no matter how many shots you hit, the enemy Aqueous Knights will not be incapacitated. So that's the objective. I noticed that the weapon of the 013 weak knight had somehow been changed. It was a large, high-powered rifle that the enemy weak knights had. In other words, the objective was to recover the weapons of the enemy weak knights they had defeated in the debris. Or did you read this situation and leave it here? By the time the enemy Aqueous Knights realized this, the game was over. Damaged by the firing of its high-powered large rifle, the enemy Aqueous Knights finally gave the signal to give up. Yeah, what? A cheer went up in central control, but the battle wasn't over yet. Some of the pirates were sometimes dissatisfied with the duel and continued to fight afterwards. This was especially true of the pirates who had come from the Galactic Federation side. And recently, with the destruction of the Federation's giant guild, the number of pirates coming from there has been increasing. Tactless. Scramble team, cover 013. At the same time I shouted, the tactical operator scrambled to launch and ordered the troops who were trying to protect the evacuated recruits to rush to the scene. But it was the fucking asshole who interrupted him. Wait. Protecting the evacuated recruits is the top priority, and while 013 is in the middle of it, order the recruits who are providing on-site support to withdraw as well. Don't be silly. Lieutenant Iron, look. The operator's voice stopped me as I was about to rush over to the fucking idiot. I huffed and turned towards the monitor to see the 013 weak knight charging towards the attacking pirate battleship. This is reckless. But the 013 weak knight dodged the rain of bullets and approached the pirate battleship with a speed that clearly exceeded the weak knight's capabilities. That's it. I finally realized that the backpack of the 013 weak knight had been replaced when I saw it. Enemy, it looks like the Aqueous Knights gave it to 013. Oh, so the Aqueous Knights pilot was a cavalryman. No doubt the Aqueous Knights manipulator was angry that his own duel had been tainted. So, it must come to that. The 013 weak knight did not fire back at all, but concentrated on evading and dodging the enemy's barrage, finally entering the pirate battleship's firing blind spot point. Then, he thrust his large rifle at the main bridge. Haha. Ahahaha. At that moment, my elation reached its peak. Of course, everyone in the room except the fucking idiot probably felt the same way. Even the two Mistress Pierre officers were watching the monitor with cheeks dyed and eyes glued to the screen. "You can fuck me when you get back," I said in my mind. I had the good sense not to say it aloud, and I was also a little embarrassed because I wasn't sure if I could get a husband. However, if you think about it objectively, I'm a delinquent princess without a husband, but I'm still royalty and a virgin. I guess I'm worth something. But I really don't know what to think about this. If Lieutenant Nagato had been by my side, I would have asked her immediately. Rather, I was inexplicably drawn to the young man. "We're receiving a surrender signal." The pirate battleship immediately sent a signal to surrender. Well, if he could stick his rifle on the bridge, it was checkmate. The head of the pirates who let the battle continue may have given up, or their men may have rebelled. Well, judging from the way the pirates sent a surrender signal to Cadet Sena with a call of praise, it was probably a rebellion pattern. After that, the pirate battleship was captured by the following troops and led back to the base. And with it came the return of a new hero. That's awesome. Most of the available men on the base had gathered to celebrate the hero's return. Everyone's faces were bright and uplifted, a fervor that showed how many of them had been frustrated by that bastard. When the 013-week knight landed on the main taxiway near the central control tower, he was greeted with a salute. And as soon as the young man, Cadet Sena, showed his face, cheers and applause erupted from the surroundings. But the limp-dick bastard was alone, staring at it with a cold expression. He's a small man in many ways. Although he didn't say it, everyone around him must have felt the same way, including me. However, it wasn't enough to dampen the enthusiasm of the hero's return. It seems that those who shy away from the sentiments of bastards don't come to this place and stay in the base to avoid trouble. You seem to be in a good mood, but what you've done has deviated from my orders. Be prepared for an inquest and a military trial. While the people around him were looking at his actions coldly, the way he folded his arms and put up his best pretense was pathetic. He looked like a pompous thug. "Commander Algers. If it's an excuse, I'll hear it at the hearing. Get him out of here." Sena, on the other hand, had plenty of room to maneuver. As if irritated by the atmosphere, he shouted, "I challenge you to a duel." The moment Sena declared that I fell in love with him.